Welcome back to Recruiting Blitz. My name is Verghese. We appreciate you guys tuning in. Before we get started, be sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel. Be sure to check out our work over at InsideNebraska.com as well. We have plenty more recruiting intel over there, football coverage, basketball coverage, and so much more. Steve's check down is up from Nebraska's win over Northwestern. I have recruiting intel up from the weekend and an early look and some early intel on the upcoming visit weekend as Nebraska is anticipating its biggest recruiting weekend yet for the primetime matchup with USC on Saturday, November 1st. Just wanted to get back into this past weekend for Nebraska before we do look ahead at a couple of developments I wanted to touch on at the end of this episode with next weekend's visit weekend. But just wanted to touch on the weekend that was for the Huskers in the 26th class. Of course, had Demod Lewis, official visitor from North Carolina, on campus. Early returns are strong. He's still expected to Florida State next weekend. We'll see if that visit does truly happen. But do think it's ultimately going to come down to the Huskers and the Seminoles. Feel good about Nebraska's chances here, just with where both these programs are at and their ability to pull this off. Ultimately, I do think it's going to come down to whether he wants to stay on the East Coast, play in the ACC, like his role maybe better in uh, Florida State's defense versus his role in Nebraska's offense, where he's likely a jack in John Butler's scheme with the versatility to potentially play defensive end as well. The big news in 26, Danny Odem was back in town, top-ranked four-star cornerback commit. Of course, we've talked a lot this season on Michigan's pursuit of him, Ohio State's pursuit, Clemson at one point. So with all the programs involved, it was a big deal for Nebraska to get him back in town, and he enjoyed his time back around the campus. Brought his former high school teammate and childhood friend Juju Johnson out of Farrell, Pennsylvania, with him. Johnson as a PWO, essentially PWO, modern PWO offer, essentially been offered a spot on the roster, but won't have a traditional scholarship and won't sign any rev share either. So kind of earning his way on the team. And so he's a guy that, again, I kind of anticipate is going to be Nebraska's next addition here in this 26 class. Put that up over at Inside Nebraska over the weekend. Think it's just a matter of time. In fact, by the time this is up, might just be in the class. Just think it's a matter of time before Nebraska gets that done, and that should just about do it. I think the door is just about closed on other schools with Danny Odem. Think Nebraska is going to get through the finish line there. Sign Odem, sign Johnson, and add both those guys. Johnson having a pretty productive senior year on both sides of the ball for Farrell. Could play running back in Nebraska. Could work in the DB room. I think he's got an opportunity to earn an early role on special teams. Mike Eckler likes to find these talented, versatile athletes, and Johnson is pretty talented and pretty versatile. So a guy I can definitely see finding a role at some point along the way in his Nebraska career if he does, in fact, go ahead and join the program. Tedarius Hughes, Florida State four-star commit in the 26th class was on campus. Nebraska is still working to pull off that flip as well. Big development there. I mean, the goal for Nebraska this weekend was not necessarily to pull off the flip, but get that official visit or a return official visit scheduled with him, or just figure out a plan to reconnect in person, whether that's going down to see him during the bye week here in a couple of weeks, or getting him back on campus next weekend for the USC game, or at the end of the month for the Iowa game. Whatever that looks like, Nebraska needs to get him back in town, or needs to have at least one more in-person interaction, in my opinion, before signing day in on December 3rd. Right now, it's Nebraska battling Florida State. Miami's still in the mix too. I've got an eye on the Hurricanes and just how hard they're going to push over these next 4 weeks. A lot can change here in this 26 cycle over the next few weeks. I think you're about to see even more coaching turnover. That's going to change a lot. I think you're about to see the domino effects of that. Schools rushing to address needs. A school like Nebraska that is kind of just trying and working to address needs can change some things here late. So I think there's an opportunity for multiple dominoes to fall, and I think this is a work in progress situation where. I think Nebraska is going to assess how they stand with Hughes coming out of the weekend, how realistic a flip is, and if they feel that they still have a chance, we'll continue to push. But if odds are they just don't think that's going to happen, they don't think you're going to be able to get him out of the state of Florida, I'd expect them to move with a sense of urgency on another defensive back because they still need one. They really want to add a big playmaking safety here in the 26th cycle, and I get the sense they'll move quickly if they don't feel good about where things stand with Hughes coming out of the weekend. In the 27 cycle, Trey Taylor was back on campus, peer recruiting. Had a few guys with him, including Khalil Taylor, four-star wide receiver out of Pine Richland. His first trip to campus. Nebraska was early to offer, like I mentioned. He was a Penn State commit, longtime Penn State commit, backed off right before James Franklin was fired, then fully reopened his recruitment after Franklin was fired. Planning visits to Oregon, Ohio State in the mix, Nebraska in the mix. Really enjoyed his time on campus. Nebraska, of course, has those ties to the Northeast. Really likes the offense. Really enjoyed connecting with Taylor. And of course, really enjoyed the game as well, getting to see Nebraska's resolve. That was the big thing coming out of the weekend. Again, I know this fan base, wants to see certain things from this program every week. And obviously, Saturday's win wasn't the prettiest, but for a lot of these recruits, I said it after the Maryland game, I believe, and I definitely said it after the Michigan State game. But in years past, you know, recruits that have followed this program and recruits that have followed, just football and college football in general, know how tough it's been, how tough this Big Ten conference has gotten, know how hard it is to win. Taylor, I mean, firsthand, Penn State commits, saw Penn State, at one point a national title favorite this season, lose three straight to Northwestern at home, to UCLA at home. And so they know in this conference how tough it is to win. To see Nebraska fight through four quarters and win the way they did in that fourth quarter really meant a lot to a lot of guys, including Taylor, including Gabe Jenkins, four-star defensive athlete who could play linebacker, could play safety. The two visited together. Both are from the Pittsburgh area. Both former Penn State commits, now back on the market. Nebraska made a strong first impression with both. Are expected to get both back on campus in the near future. I thought Nebraska did a good job with Keyshawn Taylor as well, three-star edge rusher out of Rockford, Illinois. Plays at Guilford High School up there. I have my story up over at Inside Nebraska, but for him, it was just seeing Deshaun McCullough, seeing the jack position in action, really meant a lot. The opportunity to kind of move around a bunch in Nebraska's defense really sticks out. He's a guy that really wants to play that stand-up edge role. I will say he picked up a Michigan offer this week. That's a big one for him. He thinks that's a program he grew up rooting for and following, and not necessarily the program he's a fan of, but a program he watched a good bit of, and obviously was a fan of Aiden Hutchinson as an edge rusher himself. So I've got an eye on that one. He's one that it's going to I think it's going to be a Big Ten heavy recruitment. And I'm waiting to see kind of as his recruitment progresses, as he really gets his office under him, what programs really start to rise and really emerge as true favorites for him. Right now, like Nebraska early on, like Iowa early on, and Michigan since offering, I think, and then Ole Miss is the non-Big Ten school I'd keep an eye on in that recruitment. Down in 28, I thought Nebraska did well getting Anthony Busby on campus. That's going to be a recruitment. That's going to be a fight over these next few years. He's one that is in the midst of a breakout sophomore season. Nebraska was the first Power Four to offer. He shortly afterwards added a Missouri offer as well. It's going to be a Missouri-Nebraska battle, in my opinion, but I think this is a recruitment that's going to see some national contenders join the mix. He talked to me about Michigan and Ohio State, a few other programs he'd like to get an offer from. Nebraska being the first to offer meant a lot. Keith Williams, his belief in Busby's talent meant a lot. Those two spent a lot of time around each other again on Saturday. Then he got to connect with Rob Dvorak, watched Nebraska's linebackers in action, got to see Dawson Merritt play a good bit as a freshman. That meant a lot. And so feel good about the first impression Nebraska made there. Again, this is one that Nebraska essentially fighting an uphill battle against Missouri. Any positive visit and anything that gets Nebraska to move the needle there is really helpful in what's going to be, a recruitment that we're not, it's going to be ongoing for the next 2-3 years. So um, this is as positive as a first impression as you can make. And I think Nebraska's well positioned to get him back on campus. He said potentially later this season, either for the Iowa game, maybe even next week, but more realistically, likely in the offseason. But Nebraska's not done in that recruitment. Do think he's a fan of the defensive scheme and likes the way Nebraska plays defense and the way they develop, the way again the young guys get in, the way they rotate up front and through the front seven. I think all of that made an impact on him and other defensive targets in town. Before we get out of here, I did want to touch on a couple of developments to track and some two things we just reported on over at InsideNebraska.com. for the coming weekend. USC is going to be the biggest recruiting weekend of the year. We'll have another video up later this week breaking down the visitor list, guys, to know what's at stake for the Huskers um, upcoming. But just one name to mention in the 26th class, Nebraska's working really hard to get Julian Walker, Michigan four-star edge commit on campus. He stands 6'6", 255 pounds, out of Dutch Fork High School down in South Carolina. Michigan's held this commitment since the summer. He rounds out a really, really impressive defensive line class for the Wolverines in the 2026 cycle. But Nebraska offered in September, has tried and stayed in regular contracts, tried to get him on campus a few times, hasn't really worked out. They are pushing, and I say this because there's no visit it's locked in, and we'll see if he actually makes it to campus. But Nebraska's pushing really hard for him to be in town on November 1st. And that'd be a big deal because he's one that if you're looking at remaining needs for Nebraska, it's edge rusher, it's defensive line, and it's safety primarily on the defensive side of the ball. Of course, they're also after another receiver. We'll get Jasir Rogers, four-star Penn State commit, on campus for an official visit this coming weekend. So that's another need they're looking to address. But with Walker, as Nebraska is looking to address the needs, the ideal goal for Nebraska in addressing these needs is finding guys who can contribute immediately, who can, kind of play in the rotation like Cade Petrock has this year in the defensive line, like Dawson Mayer has at linebacker. And, the goal is for Danny Odem to contribute early in the secondary. If like the aforementioned Tedarius Hughes, if Nebraska does flip him, the goal would be for Hughes to contribute early. And the same thing for Walker. It's 6'6", 255 pounds. That's a guy that won't need a whole lot of time before he's ready to contribute. The goal for Nebraska would be to try and pull off that flip and kind of show him, hey, compared to Michigan, and then the other program to watch here is South Carolina. He visited South Carolina 4 times already this season, three games, and has made an official visit there. His father is on staff. He's an assistant strength and conditioning coach for the Gamecocks. They're probably the program best positioned to pull off the flip right now. Michigan is for sure stressed about his consistent visits to South Carolina, the growing presence of the Gamecocks in this recruitment. But what looms in this recruitment is Shane Beamer, what he ends up doing. South Carolina's, kind of had an up and down season as well. Does Beamer go and follow his father to Virginia Tech? Does he stick at South Carolina? If he does, and even if he does, how supportive is the fan base of him and what he's building there? You think generally positive, but we'll see. And so I'm waiting to see kind of how, again, the month of November I think is going to be huge for that recruitment. What we know going into the week is I think South Carolina is this program that's best positioned to flip him away from Michigan. He is expected back in Michigan at the end of the month. He's going to the game to see Ohio State, Michigan. Really excited about that game, and I think obviously, I think that's going to dictate this whole recruitment, how that visit goes, because he'll be signing a week later, and so over these next few weeks. Does Nebraska get him on campus? North Carolina's tried to get him on campus. Will they be able to do that? Does South Carolina get him on campus? What happens with his father too? Is his father going to again with what happens with Beamer? If Beamer moves, does his father move? All of that lurks and all of that looms. But if Nebraska does in fact get him on campus, I think the door is open for Nebraska to pull off the flip. But everything here hinges on Nebraska getting him on campus. I think Nebraska can show him they have the best path to the field compared to South Carolina and Michigan. I think Nebraska can make a case for themselves as a program best positioned to develop him. Um, Even though that is a bit of a long shot as well. And I also think there's an opportunity to do something different. And despite Nebraska's recruiting class, they do have, it's a smaller recruiting class, but they do have the resources as shown in 27, as seen with some of these head-to-head battles they've won, like for Danny Odem. They have the resources to win these type of recruitments from an NIL standpoint. They can go head-to-head with Michigan and South Carolina if needed to, and put up the biggest offer if they so choose to. So that's all there on the table, but they just need to get him on campus first. So they're pushing. We'll see if he gets on campus on Saturday. That's going to be something I'm going to be tracking heavily over the week. A couple of the flip targets we'll be monitoring going into the weekend, including Cameron Wilson, four-star Syracuse edge commit. Nebraska's still hoping to try and pull off that flip, try and get him back on campus for a game this year. We'll see if he makes it into town. That's another one I'm watching. And then the other note, a couple of five stars in the 27 class expected. We reported on it a couple of weeks ago. But Xavier Saab and Amari Saab, brothers in the 2026 and 27 class. Amari in the 26 class, Xavier in the 27 class. Xavier ranks as the number one athlete and a five-star prospect in the 27 cycle. Plus, Ahmad Hudson, 27 five-star tight end, number one tight end in the country, a priority Nebraska target, of course. Both those guys expected back in town. Likely, not likely. Potentially not the only five stars in town for Nebraska this weekend. I'm expecting a few more big additions to the visitor list. This visitor list is going to be huge. I'm fully anticipating Nebraska's biggest recruiting event of the season, potentially of the year. I don't think anything's going to match what they were able to put together for the Battle of the Boneyard and the Huddle Futures Forum. Just both of those events coinciding on the same weekend in June made that, plus an official visit weekend, made that the biggest recruiting weekend of the year. But definitely for this 2025 season, this is going to be the biggest recruiting weekend of the year. So we'll have more over at InsideNebraska.com through the week. So be sure to stay tuned over there. We'll have an update later this week as well, a video on the visit weekend ahead. Appreciate you guys tuning in. That'll do it for us. We'll be back later this week.